Rudy and Sam SIGEL. At the start of 2014, I was having trouble with my landlord. I had just rented a one-bedroom apartment, and the landlord began to complain that I was opening up the windows. I would only have them about 2 inches wide, but since the heat was included in the rent, he said I had no right to open the windows at all. And he began to enter the apartment when I was not there. And he went out of his way to provoke problems with me and ended up kicking me out of the apartment for opening up the windows. At that time, I had only kept in contact with one person in the WATERBURY area who I was friends with, and his name was Rudy SIGEL. Rudy SIGEL and his teenage son named Sam had recently moved into a dilapidated house on Walnut Street. Before he moved in, he said that it was an abandoned house that had been used by bums and drug addicts as a crack house. Rudy said that he had to replace most of the windows because they were all broken, and he tapped into the gas line to heat the downstairs. The upstairs of the house consisted of 3 rooms with piles of old junk like disgusting carpets and broken furniture. The place stunk like urine, and Rudy's dog had been allowed to use the upstairs part of the house as a bathroom. So there were piles of dog crap laying all around. He said that he was given the opportunity to live at that house by the current owner for a very low rent in exchange for fixing the place up due to the fact that Rudy was a carpenter and construction worker. Rudy liked the idea that I would pay him $600 a month to rent the upstairs of that house, where conditions were very poor and probably not exactly legal to rent out. But I did not have any other options at that time. And at that time, I considered it 2 guys working together to help each other out. When I moved in, Rudy SIGEL had been in the place for several months, but the house was still completely filthy, like he had never tried to clean the house once after inheriting it from homeless people and drug addicts. He said he had been busy getting the basic necessities seen to, like getting the toilet to work and replacing all of the broken windows. However, I believe that he had been in the place for 6 or 7 months. Yet it still appeared like a dilapidated crack house. Garbage covered the floor like a carpet. There was junk piled up everywhere, and he was living like a psychotic shut-in with filthy pots and pans stacked up everywhere, and food splattered all over the stove and walls, and junk decomposing everywhere. It was the worst house I had ever seen. Rudy had been an alcoholic, but was now 3 months sober. So I considered the fact that he was still adjusting to sobriety. Rudy acted a little crazy a few times when I first moved in. Once he began to yell that I ate too much for dinner one night, even though it was my food that I had bought at the store. And then he got upset when I cleaned the place up, picking all of the garbage off the floor and throwing it away. When he got home, he wanted to know where all his stuff went, and he got upset that I threw away a bunch of rotten apples that were sitting in the corner of the room, growing mold. He said he was going to use those apples to bake a pie, and began pouring the garbage can all over the floor, looking for his apples. A day or 2 later, he called for a dumpster to be dropped off at the house, so I could begin emptying all the garbage that lay in piles upstairs. He had even let in a stray cat that had been living upstairs for months. Rudy said that it was crazy, so I'd better watch out for it. It did not have a litter box, and like the dog, used the bathroom wherever it wanted. So when I picked up some broken furniture to take out to the dumpster, I saw the cat hissing at me. Its eyes looked insane, and it probably had rabies or something. I put on some thick work gloves, I grabbed it, and I put it outside. This all may sound strange, but the whole house was in really bad shape. There was garbage everywhere, and there was nothing of value. I walked into the basement one day and saw that most out of place was a Kawasaki motorcycle. It looked like a newer model bike, and when I asked Rudy about it, he said that it was his son's. However, it needed some work done. Around that time, Sam was around 16 years old. After 2 or 3 months of cleaning and organizing the house, the place started to look better. Together, we fixed the upstairs bathroom, installing a shower and new water pipes so that the sink and toilet could work. We also tore down a wall and installed some new electrical wiring on the top floor. I helped him do all of this and appreciated the fact that he was fixing up my apartment, but I understood that this is what the owner of the house wanted him to do, to fix the place up in return for a low rent. Rudy also did some work downstairs in his apartment and began to clean the house up a little more, so it began to look normal. He slowly brought in better furniture that he found, and he threw all the junk out that came with the house. So that was all Rudy needed. I'll think to myself, sobering up and just a little bit of help. The extra $600 a month and a guy willing to help him fix his house up was all a guy like Rudy needed to improve his life. So I was real happy that things seemed to have gotten better for both myself, because I now had a place to live, and for Rudy and his son Sam, who also appeared more calm and happy these days. Now, a lot of things have become clear to me since I moved out of Waterbury and kept in contact with Rudy over the next 3 years. I now understand that Rudy is part of the military's secret society. However, at first, I thought Rudy was something of a throwaway guy that the secret society would keep around, and that he was an experienced carpenter who knew about all aspects of construction. But he was a drunk, willing to live in the poorest of conditions and work for beer money. And I knew that this is how the military preferred their citizens to be like, poor and desperate. And Rudy was the friendliest guy I'd ever seen. Wherever he went, he would strike up conversations with anyone he saw. So I guessed that this was exactly the type of useful idiot the military liked to keep around. After I moved into Rudy's house, I saw that he was surrounded by the same types of people that I had been surrounded by. But like other people I've known in my life, Rudy seemed to be a good person who was basically left alone by them, so he was oblivious to what they really were. Yet now, at the end of 2019, I consider myself very naive that I did not see what Rudy was before, and I am lucky to have made it out of that house alive. Everything became very clear to me in the spring of 2018 when Rudy traveled to my house in New Hampshire to help me do some work on my furnace. At that time, Rudy acted like a different person who was trying very hard to sabotage my heating system. So I thought back to the time when I rented the upstairs of the house, and some things became very clear that Rudy was not just a regular guy that I just happened to meet in Waterbury. So I want to tell you a little bit more about how things were when I rented the apartment from Rudy SIGEL. So every couple of days, Rudy would yell up the stairs if I wanted to come down and have a cup of coffee. So would sit there in his living room talking. And every so often, Rudy would say something that suggested that he was a very intelligent guy. And it was usually a very clever or witty remark. But then, at most other times, Rudy would say things that were outwardly very stupid, as if he had no common sense whatsoever. For example, Rudy was talking about setting up another construction company, and he said, and I quote him, "If I am working a job and my customer pays me the entire amount at the start of it, they will be lucky to ever see me again." I mean, I probably won't finish the job. Maybe I will, but I'm definitely not going to bust my ass to get it done. So at the times that he would say things like this, I did not exactly know if he was serious or not, because it was a moronic thing to say. He seemed very serious when he said things like that, but I guessed at the time that he was just joking around and trying to sound stupid or irrational on purpose to get a laugh. And I would respond with something like, but you really can't run a business like that, because if you do shit like that, your customer is not going to refer you to any of their friends or give you any more work. So it's like shooting yourself in the foot doing business like that. And he would say something like, I don't know, there's always more work, so I'm not too worried about that. So it was like two voices coming out of this guy. Sometimes a sensible and clever voice, but a lot more often a careless and irresponsible idiot's voice who would say things that suggested that you could not really take him serious or trust him. Still, Rudy was an experienced carpenter and knew about all aspects of construction. So sometimes I would ask Rudy for advice on construction-related topics. Around that time, I had gotten a small used pickup truck and was driving around trying to get landscape work. So I had to write a couple of landscape plans and then estimates. And I was also making videos concerning private investigations. So around November of 2014, after going into New Milford, Connecticut, and video recording the area known as Vatican Hill, I asked Rudy if he could take a look at the video I recorded and help me identify two things. The first was this, and I asked him the correct name for this type of structure, and he told me that it is called a corrugated metal building. Then I showed him video of the contents of this garbage bag I found along the railroad tracks in New Milford, close to that corrugated metal building. And I asked him, do you have any idea what this is, or know if it is used in car mechanics or something else, because it looks kind of bad to me. And he was standing behind me and he got real quiet. And so I turned around and saw that he appeared extremely scared, like he was paranoid. And I said again, do you know what that is used for? And he said no. And then he turned around and hurried out the door so quickly that he bumped into the door frame as he rushed out. So at the time, I thought that he was nervous of seeing something like that, because everything in that bag together looked like it was being used for some sort of crime. But looking back, what did not make any sense was that he did not look confused or ask any questions. He just ran out of the room in a panicked state, looking extremely paranoid and almost guilty. Another one of the videos I asked him about had to do with an investigation in the town of Watertown, which was right next door to Waterbury. I did not exactly know what type of structure this was. However, it was an unsafe structure left in a state that could trap people inside. And based on some clues, it seemed like people had been trapped in there at some point. So I walked downstairs one morning and I asked Rudy if he could take a look at a video and identify what type of structure it was. And he said he could, but that he was running a little bit late. So I went back upstairs and quickly got my laptop computer and then went back downstairs and saw that he was already outside headed toward his truck. So I walked outside and I approached him as he closed his truck's door and started the engine, and he said, I have to go. And I said, well, it's right here. Can you take a quick look? And I started to open the laptop up, whereupon he glared at me like he was enraged, and he threw the truck into gear and he peeled out, ripping up his yard and tearing across the parking lot out into the street, and peeled out with tires screeching up the road. And it was very crowded where we lived, and that was an extremely dangerous thing to do. And I'm surprised that he did not run anyone over or get into a car accident. But it reminded me that for the whole time I was there in that apartment, whenever I would work on an important video or investigation, the people outside would start peeling out in vehicles. And they would do this every 5 minutes or so for hours on end.